The Outer Worlds is getting some new DLC. In just 1 week, the Outer Worlds Peril on Gorgon DLC expansion is releasing. But fortunately, Private Division reached out and actually provided me with a code to play a bit of this DLC early. So in this video, I'm able to talk about my first impressions with the DLC, my first hour or so of gameplay. Now of course that's not a boatload of time, but I think it's enough time to really kind of figure out how big or small this is going to be, whether or not this is more of a true to form expansion sized experience or not. So as far as how this worked, basically I did have a code provided again, so a big thanks to Private Division, but also note that that could bias me in some way. There's no other compensation, it's just a code for early access to the DLC, so do keep that in mind as you watch my impressions. And more or less they asked that I restrict my gameplay to 1 hour or so, showing only gameplay from that first hour in the background, and I could do almost anything. They just asked that I didn't go too far in the story or spoil certain areas. But frankly, I didn't even get to some of the areas I wasn't meant to show on camera anyway, so I can't speak to them because, again, literally didn't get that far. But otherwise, I am free to speak my mind and give my impressions on whether I liked, hated, or loved this new expansion. And with that said, let's dive into what exactly is the Outer Worlds' first expansion with Peril on Gorgon. I'm not going to give any major spoilers here, just kind of an overview of the initial introduction, what exactly is going on. As I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Fallout New Vegas expansions of past, this will feel familiar to you in that this is going to be an expansion that takes you to a totally new location, that with a new asteroid you can travel to. You're able to start after completing the radio-free Monarch quest, and one of the interesting parts about the Outer Worlds is, technically, once you beat the game, you're kind of done, in that it is literally game over. So you'll have to load an older save, preferably a higher level one, because this new content is definitely geared towards a high level. It's recommended being level 25 plus, although the level cap is level 30, so that's on the higher end of the spectrum. From there, just after you complete the radio-free Monarch questline and you do travel a bit on your ship, Ada will pull you aside and say to you, hey, we just got a message, and in fact, a package. As the people reaching out are the Halcyon Parcel Service. Needless to say, the DLC immediately kicks off with some of that familiar The Outer Worlds comedy. To make a long story short and not to spoil too much, the message was actually intended for Captain Hawthorne. And also the voice message itself still has the guy who sent its arm attached, which is pretty funny. But otherwise, get to this pretty cool cutscene where, more or less, it is explained there's a high-risk job on this asteroid that does have a science research center, and you have to go talk to this person to get further details. From there, you unlock a fast travel point of Gorgon. You'll find a very mysterious-looking mansion. It is somewhat abandoned, but towers overview. Very distinctive from a lot of what you've seen throughout the Outer Worlds thus far. And inside, you can drink with Minnie, a new NPC that's kind of going to act as the quest giver of this one. More or less, her mother used to work on Gorgon, the research facility there. But something happened and she never came home, so it's our job to travel to Gorgon to find out what exactly happened to Minnie's mother, and in return we are promised more wealth than we can imagine. From here you could travel to the main Gorgon asteroid itself, and this is where things get pretty interesting, as you find out that Gorgon was a past research facility owned and operated by Spacer's Choice. But now something clearly has happened here. Immediately as you land, there's an alarm for a lockdown going on, and you explore the area even briefly, you'll discover that people are holed up and hiding from something. Something bad happened here, causing the research facility to more or less fall apart from the inside out. And although I did some exploration and talked to a variety of people located on this asteroid, that was really where the plot of this stopped for me. One of the interesting parts about Perils of Gorgon right off the bat is it's clearly billed as a mystery DLC, and almost at points had a bit of a spooky vibe. There are definitely some mysterious quests in the Outer Worlds otherwise, but immediately going into this one, you just don't know a ton. Talking to some of these quest givers and even fleshing out some of the dialogue, you are left with major questions. What exactly was being researched on Gorgon? What happened that led to everything falling apart? You hear about things going bad with certain test subjects, and you could find new marauders on the planet, although they're very similar to marauders you could find otherwise. But even with just my 1 hour of play, this is one that immediately drew me in because the mystery is there all throughout. I want answers. I want to find out what happened to these people. Where are some of these people? One of the initial locations you'll go to after you land on Gorgon is a little bar that people are holed up in. There's a wide variety of individuals to talk to, and here you could actually get several side quests, many of which are pretty simple. I used to work on Gorgon, or me and my family used to live here, but then everything fell apart. Can you go into that area and find this for me, or try and find out what happened to my husband for me? But all throughout, it's just kind of anting up that that mystery. You get a few smaller details here or there, some background, but not full answers. And one aspect of this DLC that I think supports this in a pretty significant way is your companions. Obsidian did a great job at making it so your companions continue to play an active role in dialogue and discussion. You're landing on a new and foreign place that none of you have been before, and they definitely commentate over that, expressing some of their own fears or discomfort around the current situation and the mysterious or spooky aspects of it, which definitely carries over to you.
I take it back. Ain't nothing here but memories. It's so empty. Oh, Captain, something here don't feel right.
But do note your companions are definitely not forgotten in this expansion, and they definitely have some more unique responses depending on who they are or their backstory. It definitely feels like, at least somewhat, this expansion will have more of an exploration of wealth. You start off going into a giant mansion, but even further later on you can explore a Spacer's Choice headquarters, wherein you can see Spacer's Choice actually spending all of their riches. Of course, your companions commentating on this again.
Mr. Thompson told me 100 times the cannery couldn't afford spare parts for Bess. All while Spacer's Choice was building this?
It definitely is a different side that you don't get a ton of in the base game. There's Byzantium, but this felt quite a bit different than that. A couple of interesting aspects to this world that definitely feel different. There's more verticality here. You could see certain locations and you have to run up to them, or you'll just be running up and down a bit more than some of the other landscapes. Even further, voice logs are a new addition, kind of a staple of past games, but it almost fits in pretty well with this expansion because of the world. I only managed to see one, but it definitely seems like there'll be more of these all throughout as you get deeper onto the asteroid. But considering what happened, how basically there was a research facility, but then a bunch of researchers got wiped out, it is fitting to have these voice logs to actually hear from them. And at least the first one was pretty compelling. It wasn't something super new or unique, but definitely a good addition. Although an interesting dynamic with this one is it doesn't really feel like there was a ton of new stuff. Although technically the marauders you fight and find on this world are different, they're really not that different. They're without a doubt on the tougher side, but the gameplay, combat, and really who you were facing felt almost identical to the marauders you would find on other planets. And outside of that, when it comes to weapons or armors, I didn't see anything new whatsoever. Perhaps there's a few new outfits that I didn't realize were new, but at least in this first hour, there wasn't a huge dump of, oh wow, these people have totally new and unique weapons for me to pick up. But I also didn't really feel bad about it. Although I know for some people, they maybe were looking for more content in that category. What this expansion is plentiful of is dialogue and intrigue. You can talk to people a lot. You can go really in depth trying to get some of those background details. Even just when you're talking to the postal service at the start, you could easily stretch that out to a 5-10 minute conversation or a 30-second one, depending on which choices you pick. In that initial mansion, if you do some extra exploring around, you could find a secret room and find terminal entries that will give you background. Many of the conversations you have throughout this do have a wealth of dialogue choices, and almost too much. Like, there were several times during this hour where I just kept going deeper and deeper, talking to them more and more, and I was like, wait, I probably have to cut myself off here so I could actually progress things somewhat. And if that's the aspect of the Outer Worlds you love or enjoy, it definitely seems like based off my initial hour, you'll have a lot of time to do so, as I probably spent the majority of that hour talking to people. It'll be interesting to see how this evolves or changes as you go deeper onto the asteroid, again, because it is in a state of disarray and there are many threats all around. But one of the other big questions I know many will have around this is the scope of the DLC. How big is it? And it's hard to gauge from my first hour, because in that hour, I again feel like I barely scratched the surface. I did a healthy amount of talking to NPCs, exploring back rooms or trying to find secrets, while also just running around and trying to get to the next objective, and I barely progressed things. If I was playing with unlimited time, I probably would have been even further behind, because again, there's so much dialogue to dive into. It is definitely hard to tell because I don't know exactly what I'm going to find out there. Will I stumble upon another building with Spacer Choice execs that have even more dialogue dump and side quests, or most of the NPCs hold out in this initial region, and from here it's mostly just combat and questing, featuring a lot of audio logs. It really is hard to tell. The mystery is one of the biggest allures of this DLC, but also from a preview perspective, with only an hour, I wasn't able to get too deep into said mystery. But as far as my overall impressions on this one, it's definitely something to get excited for. I haven't played much of the Outer Worlds as of late. I haven't really touched the game in several months, and as I downloaded this and installed it, it was more of the familiar. More of the parts of the Outer Worlds I loved, and at several moments it definitely brought a smile to my face. The mystery definitely draws you in. It definitely feels deliberate on the side of Obsidian. You want to know what happens. And again, there is still that familiar level of comedy, intrigue, and seriousness all throughout the NPCs I interacted with. So those are my first thoughts. I would definitely love to hear from all of you in the comments down below. Are you excited for this one? What do you think about this first look, some of this gameplay of areas you probably didn't see before? A week from today, this DLC expansion does release. It'll be $15, although if you own Xbox Game Pass, you will get a 10% discount. But even further, there's actually going to be an expansion pass where you could get both the first DLC with Peril on Gorgon and the second DLC with Murder on Eridanos for a discounted price of $25. Also, a week from today, I will have a full review going over the full scope and really what this DLC has to offer, if it's worth your money. But until then, thank you again to Private Division for giving me this opportunity for early access. Until next time, I thank you all again for watching, and I hope to see you all later.